up? What is up? Alertwolf here to bring you another movie review. I know what you're thinking, guys. Two back to back. Well, each movie I've seen, I've been late on them, to be honest with you. Each movie I've seen, they're both a week late. I saw Snitch when it came out last week, and I saw Die Hard when it came out the week before. So, this is a movie review on Snitch, by the way. I'm sorry, I just blurted that out before saying that. So yeah, and so that's what happened. So I saw The Rock's latest film, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, the WWE champion. And it was pretty good. I mean, basically, Susan Sarandon was in it. Now let me, you know, and pretty much I'm trying to think of who else was in this movie that was, Benjamin Pratt plays the villain in the movie. Now, this movie's apparently based on a true story, and the premise of the film is very simple. So, The Rock is divorced. You know, he's rich, living a good life. His son is living a mediocre life, whatever. But his son is back from college. He gets a Skype message, according to the computer, right? On the computer, or I mean, according to the movie, on the computer from his best friend. His best friend is a drug dealer. Now, he sells pills and weed and shit. And, you know, his friend asks him to sign for a package, to hold on for a package of like 200 e-pills. And he goes, listen, I don't want you to do that. You can't be sending that to my house. And his friend is very forceful. Nah, you just got to do it. He's like, listen, you know, I don't do that stuff. And he's like, yeah, but you always wanted to try it, you and your girl. And you see, this is what it is. Basically, essentially, The Rock's son is a good kid. He's experimenting a little bit, you know, because it's there. And he didn't really agree to it, but it was sent to him anyway, and he knew it was coming. And what happens is, the package comes to him in the mail. He's scared to answer the doorbell. Part of him didn't even want to do it. He does it. He's terrified. He signs for the package. And when he opens up the package, in the pills, and underneath is a letter from the FBI or whatever it is, the DEA, saying, and a little thing saying, gotcha. And then they go to break in the door. They go to get him. And they get him on enough enough drugs, and he runs. Of course, everybody runs, right? They get him on enough drugs to you know, to put him in jail for the mandatory minimum for that amount of drugs is 10 years. And they're saying he's a drug dealer with intent to distribute. Now, I will say this. I really would have, you know, it's funny to me, man. He just opened it in the wrong room. I wouldn't even open the package. You know, if I had wanted nothing to do with it, I wouldn't have opened the package. But if he did, I'd open it in the bathroom, you know? Because in worst case scenario, I have an easy flushable place for it. I'm just saying. This kid opened it in his bedroom, and what he was stuck with those pills. See, because they would have had him saying, oh, you opened the package, but you got rid of the evidence, so there's a little bit of this and that there. Anyway, but now it turns out, obviously, this was a sting on The Rock's son, and this was done by his best friend to him because they had caught him like a few weeks earlier. It says he didn't want to give up anybody real. He just gave up his best friend. Now, The Rock owns a shipping company. He finds out about this, and what happens is his son, you know, this is serious, mandatory minimum 10 years. Even though his son's not really a drug dealer, hell, he doesn't even do drugs. He does weed that one time. And they're like, listen, they'll negotiate with you, but you have to provide us with names. And he's like, what names? I'm not a drug dealer. I don't know people in the drug game. The only person I know is my best friend, and he set me up. And so they ask him to try to set up anybody else, and he's like, no, I'm not going to set up one of my friends who are involved so this shit could happen to them. And The Rock wants him to do it, but he doesn't do it. Now, this leads in Susan Sarandon's character into the movie because she's the U.S. attorney for that area. Now, The Rock seeks her out to try to see if there's anything he can do to help his boy. She's like, you know, she's running for election. She's like, I believe in the mandatory minimum, blah, blah, blah. There's no exceptions, you know. And basically, she's like, there's nothing you can do. And so then he goes, well, what if I, you know, he doesn't know anybody. He's not a drug dealer. He just did a stupid thing. And she's like, well, maybe this will teach the next kid. And he's like, well, what if I got you some drug information? And she's like, no, you can't do that. It doesn't work that way. But he's very insistent. Now, you get some glimpses of The Rock's character. Before this, you know, he owns his own shipping company. He's helping out. He's on his way home. He sees the new guy working late. He asks the new guy, what you doing? He's like, I got to put this stuff inside. It's going to rain tonight. He goes, I'll help you. And then he got out of his car and helped them load a pallet full of, like, cement or something. Like bags of cement. And, you know, that's the type of guy Rock is. Now, The Rock then tries to do it himself. He takes a camera and tries to buy drugs. They literally pull him out of his car, rob him, and beat the shit out of him. And he ends up in the hospital. And the DA's like, you're crazy. You can't do this. You're going to die. She's like, but you're going to do it anyway. So then she goes, well, if you were to get me, you know, something real I could use, a real drug dealer, then maybe. And she talks about the quantity and all that. And The Rock ends up looking into everybody's background because he believes in hiring ex-cons to give him a second chance. And it turns out, obviously, the dude that he was helping earlier in the movie is the guy with the drug past. And from there, it's a series sort of, you know, he's a narc and he's trying to, the whole thing, you know. From there, it's those two guys, you know, The Rock's tricking him into saying he needs help with, like, moving drugs, and The Rock gets deeper in, and that's the movie. All of this is done to save his son. Now, the moral of the movie is to send a message that mandatory minimums with no loopholes for situations is unjust, because in many instances, like in the case of this movie, people are being set up by their friends just to rat on people, but in many cases you're getting first-time offenders for what was meant for the criminal kingpin, so they couldn't just skate. And that's what, and at this point, this is a political thing. I'm gonna agree on it, because a lot of times you have these mandatory minimums, and I understand the necessity for them, because especially with the Megan's Law, you know, people like having a mandatory minimum on, you know, child rape. I mean, come on. But the reason for it is because people were getting off or given, like, slap on the wrist sentence, like, oh, you touched your daughter, she was 17, that's fine. You only get a year or 6 months, maybe some probation, counseling. I mean, this is how some of these things in some of these courts happens. Because of that, this is why the mandatory minimum was set in place. But the problem with the mandatory minimum is every case is unique. There is no such thing as a cookie cutter case that isn't unique. Every case is unique. Every case has its own set of circumstances, and most of the time you're guilty, but some of the times you're guilty because of this reason, and you know what I mean? So that there's ways, there should be, you know, a loophole for certain situations. That's what I'm saying. A mandatory minimum doesn't look at the situation, it just looks as the crime and blanket statements it. So it has its pluses and minuses regardless of what side of the fence you're on. But that was the purpose of this movie, and it succeeded. Because none of this would have happened if the state hadn't set this kid up. And that's exactly what they did. They set up somebody they knew really wasn't involved in the drug game. An innocent kid who falls under temptation. And you see, you're not supposed, you see, that's the thing. You tempt somebody with something, they might not have done it if you didn't tempt them. You know what I mean? It's like I you know, not to delve out of the range of my review here, but it's like that show Bait Car, right? They leave like a car in an area that has high theft, and the most popular model that people like to steal with the keys in the ignition or something stupid, right? The door's unlocked. So you're not catching the real car thief, are you? The guy who's gonna break into the car. You're catching people who are crimes of opportunity. You know, they're like, oh, maybe it's a kid seeing a joyride, you know, whatever it is. You're not really catching the hardened criminal, because he'd walk away from a car that looks good to be true, but whatever. What I'm saying is, you know, you don't want to tempt people with something, because they may not have done it if you hadn't tempted them into it. But, alright, that aside, now how does this movie rate as an action movie? Now, the action in this movie, I'm going to be honest, happens during the movie, but the movie itself, the action isn't the purpose of the movie. The story is, and the action just happens because of the story, is what I'm trying to say. It's not so much an action movie as a movie with action in it, because there was a firefight in one scene, and it really, you know, The Rock had to run, you know, crazy stuff, and you know, the same thing goes on throughout the movie. The main action sequence is only towards the end of the movie, and it's pretty good, I must say, as far as car chases and all that. Now again, Susan Sarandon, I don't know why she did this film. I'm gonna be honest with her, with you guys. It could have been anybody. You know what I mean? I guess I understand why the movie got her to do it. I don't understand why she did it. It wasn't really. Maybe she just needed easy money. It wasn't that hard of a role, but she played it well. Now, let me get down to the rating of the film. Because of its thought-provoking nature, which is always good. If a movie makes you think, that's a good thing on a relevant issue. Because the action was good and the acting was all. This whole movie was the Rock and the actor who played the guy who was helping the Rock. You know, it was a very, very small type of cast, but you know, this movie was basically held down by the Rock. So I'm gonna give this movie, for action movies, I'm gonna give it a 4.5 out of 5. And as a movie, I'm gonna give it a 4, because, and the reason why, as an action movie goes, this was fun. It was enjoyable. It kicked ass. When you wanted them to kick ass, it kicked ass. But it also got you thinking, and it got you involved. It started making you think of the big issue, which is the goal of the movie in the first place. Alright, with that being said, I've talked enough, and I've gone crazy off topic a little bit. So click it up if you like it, comment if you must, and please, please, please subscribe if you can. And this is Alert Wolf signing out.